It was a normal Tuesday morning. The sun was shining. People were walking to work, sipping coffee, looking at their phones. In the middle of the city, a man stepped out of a black car. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a hoodie. But he walked with quiet confidence. His name was Darius Cole. He was the CEO of a tech company worth over $100 million. Darius didn't like attention. He didn't care about gold watches or designer shoes. He believed in staying humble, even when he was one of the most powerful business leaders in the city. Today, he was holding a check for $3 million, payment from a huge tech deal that had taken him years to build. All he wanted was to cash the check and move on with his day. He entered the large glass doors of the bank, a place where his company had kept money for years. The floor was shiny, and the air smelled like fresh paper and old money. Customers stood in line. Some sat in chairs. Others were at counters speaking to bank workers. Darius walked up to the main desk. The bank manager, a woman named Linda, looked up. Her eyes scanned him. From his shoes to his face, she frowned. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone flat. "Yes," Darius said calmly. "I'd like to cash this check." He slid the check across the counter. Linda looked at it. Her eyes widened for a moment. Then her face turned cold. "Where did you get this check?" she asked. Darius raised an eyebrow. "It's made out to me. From Coltech Systems. That's my company." Linda stared at him. "Do you have ID?" Darius nodded and handed her his license, which clearly said Darius Cole, CEO. It even had a business card attached with the same name, same logo, same address as the check. Still, Linda didn't move. She glanced at the check again. Then at Darius. She tapped her keyboard slowly. Then, without a word, she pressed a hidden button under her desk. A minute later, 2 security guards came over. One of them spoke. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to step aside." Darius stayed calm. "Is there a problem?" "This check looks suspicious," Linda said sharply. "And we can't verify your identity." Darius took a breath. People in the bank had started looking. Some were whispering. A child pointed at the security guards. Darius felt a wave of quiet shame, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he knew exactly what was happening. They didn't believe him. Not because of the check, not because of his ID, but because of how he looked. Because he was a black man in casual clothes, holding a check worth more than some people earned in a lifetime. Darius leaned in slightly, his voice low and calm. "You have all my information. You have the check. You can call the company listed. You'll speak to my CFO, or better yet, ask for me, because I own it." Linda crossed her arms. "You need to leave, or we'll call the police." Darius looked at her for a long moment. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He simply picked up the check, folded it, and put it back in his jacket. Then he looked around the bank, at the guards, at the other customers watching, at Linda behind the desk, and he said quietly, almost gently, "You've just made a $50 million mistake." Then he turned and walked out the door. No one stopped him. No one apologized. Outside, the sun still shone, but something in the air felt colder now. Darius pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah," he said into the phone. "Cancel everything. Move all company accounts, and tell the team we're cutting all ties with them. Start now." He paused. "Also, let the others know what just happened. I think they'll want to hear it." He hung up. A few birds flew overhead. The street buzzed with traffic. But somewhere, deep inside that big bank, a storm had just begun. And no one, not even Darius, knew just how big it was going to get. Darius didn't go home. He didn't sit in silence or try to cool off. He walked straight into his office building, a tall glass tower in the center of the tech district, with the name Coltech Systems glowing at the top. People greeted him as he passed, not just with respect, but with admiration. Inside the top floor, his assistant stood up as he walked in. "Sir, everything okay?" Darius gave a small nod. "Tell the board we're meeting in 15 minutes, and get me Richard from finance. Now." His assistant didn't ask questions, she just moved. Darius entered the boardroom. The long table was empty for now, but soon it would be full of people who helped him build Coltech from a tiny garage office into a global powerhouse. Every one of them respected him. Every one of them believed in what they were building. But Darius wasn't thinking about software today. He was thinking about how a woman at the bank looked at him like he was a criminal, how they called security before even checking his name, how the whole bank watched like he didn't belong there. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, but it was going to be the last. 15 minutes later, the boardroom was full. The CFO, Richard, an older white man who'd been with Darius since the start, leaned forward. "Darius, what happened?" Darius stood at the front. Calm, quiet, dangerous. He held up the check. I went to cash it this morning." He told them everything. From the moment he walked in to the moment they called security. Every word, every look, every insult hidden behind fake smiles. The room was silent. Then Darius said something none of them expected. "I'm pulling every cent from that bank." One of the board members blinked. "All of it. All of it," Darius repeated. "Personal, corporate, partner funds, investment lines, loans, credit, anything connected to Coltech." Richard frowned. "That's over $50 million. And we'll tell our partners," Darius added. "Anyone who does business with that bank while supporting us. We'll reconsider those relationships too." A woman at the end of the table raised her hand. "Do you really want to go that far?" Darius looked at her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. But his voice had weight, the kind that made people stop breathing for a second. "This isn't about a check. It's not even about me. It's about how easily they looked at someone who didn't fit their idea of wealth and assumed I was a criminal. I built this company from nothing. I slept in my car while writing code. I missed birthdays. I lost friends. And today, I stood in a bank where we've deposited millions over the years, and they looked at me like I was a thief." He paused, then added, "I won't let that slide." The board nodded. There were no more questions. Orders went out. Emails flew. Accounts began to close. And far away, back at the bank, Linda sat at her desk, completely unaware that her quiet insult had just started a fire she couldn't stop. Later that afternoon, strange things began to happen. The bank's regional director received a sudden alert. "Urgent account closure. Coltech Systems." He stared at the screen. That account was one of their biggest. It handled payroll, software contracts, and cloud licensing across 5 countries. If they lost that, other companies might follow. He picked up the phone. "Get me Linda on the line." A few seconds later, she answered, cheerful. "Linda here. Did someone from Coltech come in today?" Her voice hesitated. Yes. A man claiming to be their CEO. But the check. That was their CEO. The director snapped. "What did you do?" Linda went silent. Back at Coltech, Darius was sitting in his office, looking out over the city. His assistant came in quietly. "Sir, your phone's been ringing all day. The bank's trying to reach you. The media too. I think they found out." Darius nodded slowly. "Let them talk." He stood up. "Now we let the world see what respect really means." That night, the story broke. A headline flashed across business news networks. Black CEO denied service while holding $3 million check. Pulls $50 million in retaliation. It spread fast. People reposted it. News anchors discussed it. Some called it a bold move. Others called it necessary. Thousands of comments came in. Some from angry citizens. Some from other CEOs who had faced the same thing. and many from everyday people, saying just one word: respect. But this was only the beginning, because the bank didn't know who Darius really was, and what he was about to do would shake the business world. By the next morning, everything had changed. Darius Cole wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a headline. Across the internet, videos, interviews, and articles were everywhere. News anchors on big screens were saying his name. Business analysts were calling it one of the boldest moves ever made by a tech executive. Social media exploded with support. Millions of people, young, old, rich, poor, started sharing their own stories. Stories about being judged for how they looked. Stories about being denied simple respect. And they weren't just talking. They were acting. People started closing their own accounts at the same bank. "I stand with Darius Cole," they said. Thousands of accounts. Then tens of thousands. Money began pouring out of the bank like water from a broken pipe. And inside Coltech headquarters, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. His assistant walked in, looking overwhelmed. "Sir, CNN wants an interview. So does BBC. Forbes is offering a cover story. The mayor's office also called. They want to arrange a meeting." Darius sat at his desk quietly, then looked up. "I didn't do it for attention," he said softly. "I know, sir," she replied. "But the world is listening now." Meanwhile, at the bank, panic had begun. Regional offices were scrambling. The bank's CEO, Martin Grayson, was furious. He paced back and forth in his New York office, shouting into a speakerphone. "You're telling me one branch incident is costing us this much?" A voice on the other end stammered. "Sir, we've lost over $240 million in withdrawals just this morning. The video clips of the incident are everywhere. We're trending online, for all the wrong reasons." Martin clenched his jaw. "We need to fix this." But it was too late, because Darius hadn't just pulled money from one account. He had made calls. Big calls. He spoke to old college friends who now ran tech firms, to fellow CEOs who had built companies from the ground up just like him, to celebrity investors, media owners, and influencers, and he didn't beg for help. He just told them the truth. And they listened. One by one, they stood up. Another tech company moved $30 million out of the bank. A famous athlete announced he was canceling his brand deal with the bank. A musician tweeted, "If they can treat a billionaire like trash, imagine how they treat the rest of us. I'm out." The movement was growing. And Darius, he stayed calm. He didn't yell. He didn't attack. He didn't insult. He simply let the world see the truth. Later that week, Coltech held a public event, one they had planned months ago to launch a new product. The media came expecting to see a demo of some fancy new tech. What they got was something different. Darius stepped on stage. No slides. No flashy effects. Just him. He looked out at the crowd, then at the cameras, and he told the story. From the first moment he entered the bank, to the moment they called security, to the words he said before walking out. "You've just made a $50 million mistake." He paused. Then he looked into the camera and said, "It was never about the money. It was about respect. It was about how we, even after building companies and creating jobs, still have to prove that we belong in the rooms we built." The room went silent. Some people wiped away tears. Others stood, clapping. The applause grew louder and louder, until it became a roar. Darius stepped back from the microphone. He didn't need to say more, because the world had already chosen its side. Across the country, other banks started updating their training policies. Some launched inclusion and respect campaigns, but others were too late. They had already lost the trust. One bank, smaller but growing fast, offered Darius and Coltech a full custom service platform and promised to invest millions in minority-owned startups. Darius accepted, but he made one rule. They must never forget how this started. At home that night, Darius sat with his wife and daughter. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't in a meeting room. He was just Dad. His little girl looked up from her tablet and said, "Daddy, you're on YouTube again." He smiled. "I hope I'm saying something good." She nodded. "They're saying you made the bank scared." He laughed quietly, then hugged her close. "I didn't try to scare them," he said softly. "I just reminded them who we are." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by love, Darius knew one thing. This was bigger than money. This was a change. And it had only just begun. The boardroom of the National Bank was full. Every chair taken. Every executive present. No one smiled. Martin Grayson, the CEO of the bank, stood at the head of the table with tired eyes. He had not slept in 2 days. His voice was sharp, but his words were heavy with fear. "We are bleeding," he said, pointing at a chart on the wall. "The numbers are not going down. They're falling off a cliff." The room was silent. Another executive finally spoke. "Over $500 million withdrawn in under 72 hours. That's never happened to us." Martin didn't reply. He just stared at the chart. The red line dipped lower and lower. Then someone else said, "Sir, the problem isn't just the withdrawals. It's public trust. Even our loyal customers are asking questions now. They're watching us. Every move." Martin slammed his hand on the table. This was one branch, one mistake. But no one looked convinced. Because it wasn't just one mistake anymore. It was a movement. Meanwhile, across the city, Darius Cole sat with his legal team and 2 advisors. They were in a calm, quiet room. There was no shouting here, only plans. "Sir," one advisor said, "if you want to take legal action against the bank for discrimination, you have a strong case. Public opinion is fully behind you." Darius nodded, but didn't speak. Then another advisor added, "Also, there's a new opportunity. Several investors want you to consider launching something new, your own bank." The room went quiet. Everyone looked at Darius. He slowly raised his head. "My own bank?" "Yes, sir. With your tech background, reputation, and public trust, it could work. People are ready. They want a financial system built on respect, not just money." Darius leaned back in his chair. The idea was dangerous, big, and it would shake the very ground under the same people who had disrespected him. The news spread fast. Cole TCH CEO antis at launching new bank. People were excited. Memes, videos, and slogans popped up everywhere. "Bank on respect. We trust Cole." He cashed out. Now he's cashing in. Other banks were suddenly nervous. Their stock prices dropped. Shareholders were demanding answers. Inside news reports leaked audio of angry meetings at major banks. Some were firing employees quietly. Others were trying to clean up their image. But none of it worked. Because people remembered how it all began. One man, one check, and one moment of disrespect. Back at the old bank branch where it all started, the building was quiet. Too quiet. Only a few customers came in now. Most had moved their accounts. Even the employees looked uncomfortable, like they were waiting for something bad to happen. The branch manager, Mr. Kincaid, was called into the regional office. He sat across from a cold-looking HR director who handed him a file. "You've been suspended," she said. "Effective immediately." "What? No, wait. I didn't do anything wrong. I followed the rules." She looked at him with a tired face. The world doesn't care about your rules anymore. They care about how you treated him. He sat in silence. He knew it was over. That evening, Darius sat in his office looking at a large photo on the wall. It was his father, smiling proudly, standing in front of an old barbershop he used to own. Darius remembered the lessons his father taught him. How to stay calm when people tested your patience. How to build when others tried to tear you down. How to speak softly, but carry truth like fire. His assistant knocked on the door. "Sir," she said, The team is ready for you downstairs. We're going live in 10 minutes. Darius nodded and stood up. Tonight was not about revenge. It was about the future. In the Coltech auditorium, lights dimmed as Darius walked onto the stage. But this time, the background was different. Behind him, a single word appeared on the screen: unity. He looked at the cameras, at millions watching from their phones, laptops, and TVs, and he spoke. 3 days ago, I walked into a building just trying to cash a check. I left with a choice. I could get angry, or I could build something better. Not just for me, but for all of us. The crowd leaned in. I was told I didn't belong, but I've built my life proving that I do. And now, I'm building a future where you do too. The screen behind him changed again. This time, it showed a name: Unity Bank, powered by Coltech. The room erupted in cheers. People stood and clapped. Tears ran down faces, and in homes around the world, people whispered to their children, "Remember this moment." Outside the bank that disrespected him, someone had placed a single sign on the glass door. In bold letters, it said, "Respect is more valuable than money." And behind that door, silence, because the real noise was happening elsewhere now, and Darius Cole had only just begun. 1 week had passed, but the world hadn't stopped talking about Darius Cole. The news, social media, podcasts, even classroom discussions were all about him. People called him the man who stayed calm and still changed everything. But Darius, he wasn't celebrating. He was working. In a tall glass building downtown, the Unity Bank headquarters was already under construction. The name was everywhere, on digital billboards, on people's shirts, even painted on the streets in some cities. But inside the building, the mood was serious. Darius stood at a long table with designers, engineers, and finance experts. Papers covered the surface. Laptop screens glowed. "No big desks," he said. "No closed doors. I want customers to walk in and feel like they matter here. No one should feel small in our bank." His team nodded. They had never seen a CEO like him. He didn't shout. He didn't use big words to sound powerful. He just spoke with purpose, and people listened. Meanwhile, the bank that had insulted him was in full panic. Several of their branches were closing. An emergency board meeting was called. Martin Grayson, their CEO, looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "The damage is beyond repair," one executive said quietly. "Public trust is gone. Even our own employees are leaving." "Sir," another said, "we need a public apology." Martin sighed. He opened his laptop and began to write. The words were simple. "To Mr. Darius Cole and to everyone who watched our mistake, we are sorry. We failed to show respect, and we are facing the consequences. Let this be a lesson, not just to us, but to every institution. Respect comes first. Always." The message was posted online. Some people clapped. Others said it was too late. But one thing was clear: Darius Cole had changed the rules. Days later, the launch of Unity Bank went live. It wasn't just a grand opening. It was a movement. Thousands showed up in person. Millions watched online. The bank's app was downloaded over 10 million times in 48 hours. The first customer to walk in was an old man, wearing a faded cap and holding a small savings book. He looked around the new bank with nervous eyes. One of the staff, a young woman, walked up to him and smiled. "Welcome to Unity Bank," she said gently. "We're glad you're here." Tears filled the old man's eyes. "I've been waiting for a place like this all my life." Darius saw it from across the room. He didn't interrupt. He just smiled quietly. This was the real victory. Later that night, Darius sat in his office. The city lights blinked below him. His assistant brought him a tablet showing Unity Bank's live stats. Everything was breaking records. He looked at it for a moment, then turned off the screen. He didn't care about the numbers tonight. He opened a small drawer and pulled out an old photo. It was him and his dad again. Back when he had nothing but dreams. "I did it, Dad," he whispered. "But I didn't do it to win. I did it to open a door that no one else could slam shut again." In schools, children now learned about Darius Cole in business class. In universities, his story was taught under modern leadership. And in small homes, where families had always felt ignored by banks, people now said, "There's a place for us now." Back in the city, the old bank still stood, but the sign had been taken down. No more customers, no more noise, just silence, and a small piece of paper taped to the glass door. It said, "One man walked away quietly and shook the whole world." And far away, on a rooftop in the city, Darius looked at the stars. No camera, no lights, just him. He thought about that day at the bank, how they looked at him, how they doubted him, how they tried to make him feel small. But now he had built something that could never be ignored. Not by money, not by power, not by fear. He didn't destroy the bank. He built a better one. And in doing so, he left a message for the world. Respect is louder than revenge. And I'm just getting started. It had been 2 months since the world watched Darius Cole walk out of that bank. 2 months since a quiet act of dignity started a global conversation. But for Darius, it still felt like day one, because he had seen something far bigger than disrespect. He had seen a system that quietly pushed people down, not just in banks, but everywhere. And now, he was going to fix more than just banking. At Unity Bank headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. It wasn't just a bank anymore. It had become a hub, a center where dreams were getting funded, a place where small businesses, especially those owned by people of color, women, immigrants, were being seen for the first time. Darius stood in the elevator, holding a cup of coffee. The elevator doors opened, and a nervous young woman stepped in. She looked up, recognized him, and froze. You're Mr. Cole," she whispered. He smiled gently. "And you're running late," he teased. She laughed nervously. "I'm here for a loan. First time." Darius nodded. "Then I hope it's the last time you're ever afraid in a bank." That same day, Darius walked into a community center across town. Inside were rows of desks, laptops, and dozens of people, from teenagers to seniors. He had started something new: financial schools. Free education for people who were always left out of the system. "How many of you have ever been taught how to build credit?" Darius asked. Not one hand went up. "How many of you were told you never qualify for a loan?" Almost every hand went up. Darius looked at them, his voice firm. "That ends now." While all of this was happening, media companies tried to interview Darius daily. He refused most of them. But when one young journalist asked for just 5 minutes, he agreed. The camera turned on. The room was silent. "Mr. Cole," she asked softly, "do you feel like you got justice?" Darius paused. "No," he said. "This wasn't about justice. It was about change." She looked confused. He explained. "Justice is when I walk back into that same bank and get treated right. Change is when everyone like me walks into any bank and never has to feel afraid again." Soon after, something unexpected happened. Big companies, tech giants, fashion brands, airlines started reaching out to Darius. They wanted partnerships. They wanted to say, "We support change too." But Darius didn't say yes easily. He checked their records. "How many minority leaders do you have?" he asked. "How much money have you invested in underserved communities?" Many companies had no answers. He smiled politely and said no. But the ones who did answer, he worked with them. He didn't want fame. He wanted action. Then one morning, something quiet and powerful happened. A little girl from Detroit sent Darius a letter. It was written in purple crayon. "Dear Mr. Cole, I watched your video. My mom cried. I want to be like you when I grow up, but I also want to wear pink. Is that ok? Darius kept the letter on his desk from that day forward. That was the kind of legacy he cared about. Not headlines, not power, but hope. A few days later, he returned to the same street where the original bank stood. But it was different now. The windows were boarded up. Graffiti had been painted over. The building was empty. But on the corner, there was something new. A mural. It showed Darius standing tall, surrounded by faces, young, old, black, brown, white, all smiling. At the bottom of the mural, someone had written, "He didn't fight with anger. He fought with dignity." And he won more than respect. He won hearts. That night, Darius went home and stood on his balcony. He looked out over the city. Lights sparkled like stars. Somewhere, a bus drove by with an ad that read, "UNITBANK, built for everyone." He closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a bridge between the world that was and the world that could be. And as he took a slow breath, he whispered something to the night. We've only just started. The world didn't change in one day. But sometimes it only takes one person to begin the wave, and Darius Cole had become that wave. It was a year after the bank incident. Unity Bank now had over 50 branches across the country. Each one looked different than a normal bank. There were no heavy glass walls, no guards with cold stares. Instead, they looked like libraries, filled with warm lights, soft music, and people helping each other. Darius stood quietly in one of the new branches in Atlanta, watching a young mother sign her first home loan papers. She had tears in her eyes. She looked at Darius and said, "No one ever believed I could own a home, but you did." He didn't reply with words. He just nodded, because he remembered what that felt like, to be unseen. Meanwhile, global media was still chasing the story. They had begun calling it the Quiet Revolution. Newspapers ran headlines like, "From disrespected to revolutionary. How one man changed banking." But Darius kept a low profile. He didn't want the spotlight. Instead, he created a foundation, a silent engine behind the scenes. It gave money, training, and mentorship to Black entrepreneurs, single parents, ex-prisoners, and anyone society had pushed aside. He didn't post about it. He didn't take credit. He just watched from a distance as people stood taller. Then something happened that Darius didn't expect. The same old bank, the one that disrespected him, reached out. Their new leadership wanted to meet. They wanted to apologize. Again. This time, with real change. They offered a public partnership. They even offered to rename the branch after him. But Darius shook his head. "No," he said calmly. "I don't want my name on your building." They looked confused. He smiled. "I want your heart to change, not just your logo." And then he walked out again. But this time, not angry. This time, at peace. Weeks later, a young boy came into Unity Bank's New York branch. He looked nervous. He was dressed in old clothes. His shoes were torn. He asked the receptionist, "Can I open a bank account?" She smiled warmly. "Of course. Do you have ID?" The boy hesitated. I lost my papers." The receptionist paused. Then she looked at the wall behind her. There was a sign written in big, kind letters. "Everyone deserves a second chance. Let's start with trust." She leaned forward. "We'll help you get your papers. But first, how about a glass of juice and a warm seat?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. Darius was standing in the corner, watching. Hidden. Silent. He turned away slowly and smiled to himself. That's what he had dreamed of. Not banks, but places where people mattered more than money. Months passed. Darius kept working, but more quietly now. He spent more time mentoring young leaders. He started visiting schools, small towns, even prisons. He always gave the same message. You are not broken. You were just unseen. But now, we see you. Then, one winter morning, something strange happened. Darius didn't come into the office. No one could reach him. His phone was off. His team worried. They searched everywhere. And finally, they found him, sitting alone on a park bench, wrapped in a coat, staring at a frozen lake. He wasn't sad. He wasn't tired. He was just thinking. When his assistant asked if he was okay, he nodded and said softly, "Do you hear that?" She listened. There was silence. "Exactly," he whispered. "That's peace. After years of fighting, it's finally quiet inside me." He stood up and said, "I did what I came to do. Now it's time for others to rise." A few months later, Darius stepped down as CEO. People were shocked. Why would a man who changed the world walk away? Because he knew something most people didn't. Leaders don't stay forever. They make room for others. And on his last day, there was no big speech, no fancy goodbye. He just wrote a letter and left it on his desk. The letter read, "To the next dreamer, people will doubt you. They'll judge your clothes, your skin, your silence. Let them. Then build something so big, they can't ignore you. And when they finally listen, speak with kindness. That's how you change the world." That was the last public thing Darius Cole ever said. He disappeared from the spotlight. No one knew where he went. Some say he moved to a quiet farm. Others say he travels the world, helping people in secret. But no matter where he is, the world remembers him. Not just as a CEO, not as a businessman, but as a man who was once disrespected and answered with dignity, power, and grace.